We're going to be building an end-to-end low-code solution for Microsoft Teams using the new Dataverse for Teams, which was introduced at the end of last year in the fall. A little bit about myself. Before I go, so we're going to try to focus this session on purely demos, but I do want to give you a little bit of background for the folks who haven't seen Microsoft Teams before. And such. So my name is Noorez Khamis. Everybody calls me Rez. I'm VP Technology of two companies, CreoSpark, where we do Microsoft 365 consulting around the Power Platform, SharePoint, knowledge management, Cortex, Syntex, all the new stuff, and Microsoft Teams. And then we have got another product-based company where we build Microsoft Teams-based apps, and that's called CloudSpark. I'm a MVP and Office Apps and Services, and those are my Twitter handle and my email if anybody wants to get a hold of me. So what are we talking about today? It's a jam-packed session. I want to try to get as much as I can in this session in terms of the demos, but we want you to kind of learn how to use built-in low-code data platform for Microsoft Teams, and that is the new Microsoft Dataverse. We want you to understand the built-in relational data storage that you get with this new capability. You're able to create your new tables and your data sources and your rows and your columns and such right within Microsoft Teams. We're going to try to build some workflows and some intelligent chatbots if we have enough time using Power Automate and virtual agents and all the functionalities you guys are getting with Dataverse for Teams. And this is all going to be within the Microsoft Teams interface where we're going to be empowering teamwork within the organization and using Microsoft Teams as the hub for your teamwork. And we're going to briefly start with describing the scenario. So imagine we're in a doctor's office and we're doing a patient intake form. So we'll describe that, and then the business outcomes we're desiring, and then it's going to be purely demos. I'm not going to be monitoring the chat for questions. So if you have burning questions, feel free to interrupt, go off mute, but I'll get to the questions at the end of the session because we got a lot to cover. So what's our, this is more, when we're talking about low code, there's a lot of different items and different ways we can do that low code. So obviously for a hardcore developer, we've got SharePoint framework, and there's a lot of items on patterns and practices and free kind of tools out there you can use. And then we've got Power Virtual Agents. We've got app templates. So if you go to this URL, you can actually build really, really nice no-code to low-code solutions by following a set of instructions from Microsoft on how to build these app templates. And then we got the whole Power Platform, the reason we're here today, and this is where Dataverse for Teams comes in. So where does Dataverse for Teams fit in the Power Platform ecosystem? So this diagram was meant to show that, right? So it kind of fits with the Power Virtual Agents, the Power Apps, Power Automate, and today's session is more focused in developing Teams apps without being that hardcore developer. This is where the Power Platform really comes in. It's that low-code platform built into Microsoft 365 that has a lot of functionality that's included with your existing licensing, and that's the key. So we've got Power BI, which makes sense of your data and allows you to analyze your data. It allows you to reduce that data prep and get you the insights and answers you're looking for automatically. Power Apps allows you to build those web and mobile apps in a low-code, no-code environment, empowering your business users and citizen integrators or citizen developers to solve your own problems. The whole concept here is nobody wants to go to IT to build those solutions. We don't want to hire these consulting firms to go custom dev, write the code, which is really hard to maintain, right? So, and we want you to be able to share your apps with other people in your organization. And IT, we want them to have some governance and security and control that they can configure at the tenant level. So you don't have to be worried that you're not going against the guidelines that IT puts. Power Automate allows you to convert your business processes to flows and automate these workflows with your apps and services. And then Power Virtual Agents empowers your subject matter experts to easily create these powerful bots, and using a guided no-code graphical interface, and allows you to engage your customers, your employees, your partners from a conversational perspective. And then Microsoft Dataverse, data connectors, and the new AI builders are all common building blocks of that Power Platform. And Dataverse really fits in, Dataverse for Teams really fits in within these boxes. It allows you to give you, it gives you Power Virtual Agents for those chatbots. It gives you Power Apps, Power Automate, and a light version of that common data service, which is now called Microsoft Dataverse. So let's get into that. So Dataverse for Teams, gives you that low-code view directly within that Microsoft Teams. It gives you the relational data storage, the rich data types, enterprise-grade governance, and that one-click solution deployment right from your Teams interface. And it comes with your existing licensing. It allows everybody to easily build and deploy your apps that you're looking for to deploy across your organization. The Dataverse for Teams environment, for you guys who are familiar with the Power Platform, is automatically created for the selected team where you're creating your app in. And the new Power Apps app in Teams allows you to automatically create those apps within the team itself. That Dataverse for Teams environment is used to store, manage, and share the data, the apps, and the flows. And that's specific to your team. So each team can have one environment, and all the data, apps, and flows created within that Power Apps app inside that team are available from the team's Dataverse database. Now, actually, let me go back here because I didn't cover some stuff. So this was officially released in September of 2020 at Microsoft Ignite as Dataverse for Teams. At the same time, they changed the name of CDS to Microsoft Dataverse, and which is the common data service. And this comes with everybody, the licensing you guys already have for the most part with your Microsoft 365 licensing, excluding GCC, DoD, and some other licensing, but most hopefully everybody on the call here has the E1, E3, E5, Business Premium, Business Standard licensing for your corporate environment. Some fine print, of course, with Dataverse because they're giving it for free as part of your subscription. So it's a light version of the Microsoft Dataverse, so it doesn't have the full feature set, but it has enough that you can work with. And it currently supports up to 500 teams in your environment. The one thing to note, it's really important. So when you delete your team, you're actually deleting your whole Dataverse for Teams app and environment behind the scenes. So you got to be really cognizant of that when you're working with it. Dataverse for Teams apps only work within Microsoft Teams, the web app and mobile platforms. One of the whole reasons that Microsoft is giving this capability for free is to get that adoption of Microsoft Teams. So they're giving this functionality and this powerful capabilities for free as long as you stay within that Teams ecosystem and that hub for teamwork. Guest users can run Dataverse for Teams, but can't install, create, or edit them. That's a constant question we get from all of our clients. Will it work with guest users? They can, but they can't install, create, or edit them. We need somebody else to do that. You can now, let's say that you need to kind of go to that full version of Microsoft Dataverse instead of this light version within Dataverse for Teams. You can always upgrade your environment to a fully fledged Microsoft Dataverse environment. That's not out and released yet, but it's coming soon. There's also some other items that you want to look at when you're using these types of apps with Dataverse for Teams. So you're limited to 1 million records. That light Microsoft Dataverse environment is created when you create your Dataverse for Teams app, which maps one-to-one to the team you created in. So for each team you have in Microsoft Teams, you're getting an environment. You have maximum 2 gigabytes of capacity with your Microsoft Dataverse database that it's creating for storage for environment. It's really 1.5 gigabytes, and I'll show you a sample of that. But that's something to note. So if you have image heavy or other types of apps that are going to be past the 2 gigabyte limit, then you probably want to consider going to the full version. You also get the ability to build those table relationships that we're all used to with relational databases like SQL, like the normal Dataverse. You get basic data types only. So somebody have a question? Nope. Okay. So you get basic data types only. So there's some of the advanced data types, which you get with the full version of Microsoft Dataverse, you don't get. There's no offline mode. So with Microsoft Dataverse, the full-fledged version, you get offline mode. And then there's no built-in search or field level security or API access for developer purposes. Okay, so let's get right into the demo, and I really want to get to it because I want to finish as much as I can in the demo in the time we have allotted. So the demo today is a patient intake form. So picture this, you are a doctor's office and you've got a front desk where people, your office secretary or whoever it is, comes in and intakes the patients via a paper-based form, but now we want to make that electronic. Maybe they take a picture of the patient, maybe they get their age, their information, and then the doctor is in a back room somewhere. They need to be notified that the patient needs to be checked in, or the patient has checked in and is ready to go, so that, you know, because doctors are always busy doing their files and notes and everything, we want to inform the doctor they're ready, or they might be with another patient because it might be a time where they're waiting for the appointment, right? So, and then the next thing is we want to give the doctor the ability to see who's the next patient and the details of that patient. So the concept here is that the receptionist is going to fill out the patient intake form. The receptionist is going to check in the patient. The doctor is going to be informed right within their Teams interface, and the doctor is going to be able to see the patient details, right? So from a technology perspective, the first step is what we're going to do is set up the data source. We're going to create the metadata and add the data. What does that mean? So we're going to basically create a patient's table and a doctor's table, right within Dataverse for Teams. And we're going to add some data there just to play around with it. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a Dataverse for Teams Power App with the patient intake forms. So there's two forms. The first form is going to list all the patients. The second form is going to be able to edit a patient or add a patient and check them in. So basically it's going to be a bunch of fields that correlate to the columns that we created in the data source, and we're going to show those columns within the forms. The next thing is we're going to create a flow to check in the patient so that the doctor gets notified within their Teams interface. And then lastly, hopefully we have time for this, but we want to create a Power Virtual Agent where the doctor can just go to a chatbot and ask for who's the next patient. And then the system will give them the next patient details. So it's a pretty simple scenario, but it highlights a lot of the functionality that comes with the Dataverse for Teams. So let's get right into this. Okay, does anybody have any questions before we begin the demo? Okay, great.
Yeah, I don't see any questions.
Noorez,
Go ahead.
there is a question in the chat window.
Yep. Can somebody read it out to me?
Is this Dataverse a spun up CRM org that we get from Teams?
Is this
Dataverse a spun up CRM org that we get from Teams?
Well, you know what? I'm going to demo some of where it's spun up and where you can access it in a second. Okay, so let's just hold up with that question. Okay.
All right, let's keep going.
Okay.
Thanks,
okay.
Noorez.
Okay, great. So let me just hide this guy because it'll distract everybody. Okay, so here's our Teams interface. The first thing we want to do when we are working with this is to create a team, because when you're using Dataverse for Teams, you want it to be spun up from a team. Okay. Now, when we're creating a team, all you do is, if for those not familiar with Microsoft Teams, I didn't have my Zoom it, but you click on this Join or Create Team button. So you create a team, and today we're going to create a team from scratch. We'll make it a private team, and we will call it Global Power Platform Bootcamp, and then we will call it Patient Intake Team. So we'll just create a team called the Patient Intake Team. And I'm going to go really fast through this demo. It is recorded because I want to cover all those scenarios. So feel free to ask me questions at the end and I can go back, but right now I'm going to try to go really fast. So I've created a team here, and the idea here is that the Dataverse for Teams app is going to sit with this team. Now, the first thing you want to do when you're working with a Dataverse for Teams and your team is you want to actually go to your apps and find the Power Apps app. Now, I have it already installed, right? So here's our app. You want to click on that. That will install it on your Teams environment. And then what you want to do is when it's open, you want to actually just right-click it and pin it. So because you're going to be constantly using that. So when you do that, you're going to be able to go to the app, and create an app right from here. So it looks like an interface from here. So when you press the create app button, it's going to ask you what team you want that in. Right? So what we'll do is select the team that we just created. So this patient intake form, patient intake team, and we'll press the create button. Now this takes a few seconds. In the meantime, while this is going on, I want to actually take you to the admin center to kind of give you an idea and the concept of the environments that are created behind the scenes, probably related to that question that was just asked. And I'm going to quickly go here. Okay, so you'll notice here that we've got a new environment that was created for the team we created. As soon as we press that create app button, so it's preparing the instance right now. Now I have it a US-based tenant, but you could have it on whatever tenant you need. But let's take a look at some of the other apps I've created. So here's another Teams-based app, and where it has our own environment. And you see this little message at the top. It says, upgrade this environment database to Dataverse. So right now it's a Dataverse for Teams environment, but if you wanted a fully fledged Dataverse environment where you're passing the 2 GB mark, or you need those premium connectors that don't come with Dataverse for Teams, you can always upgrade that. So there's nothing stopping you from doing that as you scale and people start using your app. Now from here, you can also, just as the regular Power Platform, you can get to all of your Power Apps and your flows within that team. Another thing that you should be aware of is from a capacity perspective. So when I go to the resources capacity on my admin center, you'll notice that I've got a new item here called Microsoft Teams. So it already tells me that because this is a trial tenant, I'm saying, because I haven't paid for the full version of Dataverse, and it's saying I'm already over allocation, right? So for the regular version of Dataverse, where I need to buy more capacity here. But if I go here, you'll notice that I have these new Dataverse for Teams environments set up, and these Microsoft Teams right under this Microsoft Teams tab. And so the one that I just created is this one, the patient intakes. And right away it tells me, yeah, this 2 GB limit, but for the infrastructure and the piping and the tables and everything it gives you out of the box, it uses 25% of that already. So 512 megabytes of that 2 GB is gone. So that's something to note. But again, this tells you that this is a free service that's kind of leveraging Dataverse on the back end. So let's go back to the Power App to see if it got created. Okay, so it set it up. So what we're going to do is create a team called Global Power Platform, or an app called Global Power Platform Bootcamp. And I'm just going to put this in my clipboard, and we'll say patient intake. Right, so we'll call an app, call that. So right away there, you guys will notice that this is very familiar to you guys who are normal Power Apps developers. This interface of the Power App Studio and the Maker environment is showed to you right within this interface. And they've already created some forms for you. A couple of the things that you guys are familiar with is the tree view for you Power Apps developers. You got your tree view, you got the ability to add your components here, you got your data sources here. Now, this is a little bit different. Now, one of the things Microsoft did as part of that rename, they also renamed the how we were used to on the CDS. Well, CDS got renamed to Dataverse, and they renamed entities to tables. So it's a little bit more power user focused terminology here. And also fields, they named to columns because we're all used to using Excel and tables and databases. So let's call entities tables, and let's use the concept of rows instead of records. So there's also some terminology which makes it a lot easier for the citizen integrator to understand. So now let's take a quick tour of this canvas for you folks who are not used to the Power Apps interface of the Maker experience. So here we have a back button to get to all of your apps. You've got undo, redo, you've got copy paste capability, you got the ability to add your data, new tables and such, ability to add new screens to your Power App. You got an app checker. If there's any problems with your app, it'll kind of give you a remark there. Other settings like the name of your app and such, you can actually name your app from here, but there's other settings such as the icon and all that. The ability to add Power Automate and flows and connections and variables and such that we're used to in Teams. And then saving, you have that same preview capability that you have in Power Apps, so you don't actually have to go and deploy your app to actually run it. You could preview it right from this interface. And then this button, which is new, which is the publish to teams. So that team we initially chose is going to be where we're going to be publishing that. And then within that team, we're going to be choosing the channel we're publishing that team to. Now here on the left-hand side, we have the same type of tree view of all the forms and components that we're going to be using. We've got the ability to create new screens here. We've got our canvas right here where we're developing our app and adding all the different components. Our screen selector here at the bottom. We've got zoom in, zoom out capabilities, ability to do the full screen, and then the ability, that same property view on the right-hand side, and that property drop down that we're all used to. So, and then the app command bar is all contextual, so it'll change as you select different items. So now, the first thing we want to do is we're going to go to our data sources, and just to show you, because we're all used to the full version of Dataverse or CDS, where you're creating your entities and your tables and such. But right within this interface, you have the ability to create these relational tables. And so the first one we're going to do, remember our use case is we are going to be intaking patients, and a patient has possibly a patient table and a doctor table. So maybe the first thing we'll do is we're going to create a new table called a patient table. So we'll click on patient. Now the advanced settings gives us the plural name, so we don't have to worry about that. We'll just call it patient. Makes it really easy for us. And when we create a table here, it's going to do all that and set that table in Dataverse for Teams in the back end, that database. So when it creates that, then we're going to have a nice light interface right from here. And this will take us a few seconds. Let me just grab a drink. So right from this interface, it gives us the ability to enter the data, and it gives us that first column name, which we could use possibly as the patient name. You know, right from here, we're able to press the add column button, show hide columns, and then press the plus button right here to add another column. So perhaps, you know, one important thing we might want about the patient is their phone number. But notice the type dropdown we get from here of these data types. Now, if you're using the full version of Dataverse, you'll get a whole bunch of different advanced data types, but with Dataverse for Teams, you still get quite a bit, the ones you'll need for all your apps. So in this case, it's a phone. We want it to follow a certain format, so we'll use the phone data type. So we'll click on create, and notice we got two columns, the patient's name and the phone. So we'll just hit the close button for now. And what I want to do is just hit the save button so we don't lose anything on our app. And notice, actually, before I do that, you notice how the screen kind of refreshed and showed us the name and the phone right away. You know, we didn't even do anything. All we did was add another column there, and the screen kind of refreshed, and the ability to add a new record. Possibly there's no data in there. We'll add data in there in a second, but let's save that. And I want to show you a little bit more of an advanced view of Dataverse you can get into from here. So I'll hit the save button, and I'll click on this build here at the top. And when I click on that build, it'll show me all the apps. So first I'm going to select the team that I'm in. Give it a second to load. So this is the team that I'm working in for my Teams app. I'll click on the See All button here. And this is a nicer view I like working on, because this view shows me for my Dataverse for Teams app, all my apps, all my Power Apps that I have, all my chatbots, all my Power Automate Cloud Flows, all my tables and such. So I'm going to stop here from a table perspective. And you see I got my patient table. From that patient table, you know, we're going to probably want to add more columns, but first we also need another table. So let's add another table, and we will call it doctor, right? And we'll just save that table name, and we'll click on create. And notice this interface is a little bit more powerful than the other interface. That's why I really like using this interface. I'm able to see the columns directly here, right? So what I'm going to do is add a new column to this table. And for perhaps we want the doctor's email to notify them and such. So the data type on this one will be email. We'll hit the done button. And we probably want to add some, I think that's good enough for this table. Maybe what we want to do here is we got name and email, but maybe we want to populate them with some actual doctors. So right from here, we're able to populate that data. So I click on the edit data button, and I will pull some doctors in. So let's do Dr. Let's do Dr. Feelgood. and give them an email, and I've got an email that I've got to use. So I'm putting in their email because in Microsoft Teams, I want to notify them, and you notify people by their email, right? So you might have different doctors, but for now, I will use the same email. So let's do Dr. Fauci. Let's do Dr. Zeus. It's always nice when you're building these types of Power Apps to start with data, because it's really hard building your apps without any data there. The cool thing about the Power Platform is that you're working with your live apps as you're building it, not like the old school dev days where we didn't have any data and we're creating all these apps without any data, right? So and now we got all of our doctors populated that we'll use for this demo as an example. But let's go back to our tables, and we want to create some relationships between the doctor and patient, right? So we're going to add another column to the patient's table as an example of doctor, right? Because we want to know who the doctor for that patient is. And in this case, the data type here is going to be a lookup, and we're going to point to the doctor's table. And that's as easy as you see how easy that was to just create a relationship via a lookup? So behind the scenes, you don't have to worry about that one-to-many. If it's that, you can do the one-to-many and many-to-many types of relationships and stuff that we're all used to from our old data architecture days and data modeling days, but this makes it really easily to use. Now, other columns we probably want to add, let's think, perhaps we want to take a picture of the patient when they came. So maybe we'll do picture and then we'll find an image one, right? So we'll hit the save button here. Now we'll add another column. What's another one? Maybe their age is good, right? So age is not a text, but possibly a number. So let's find a number. Here we go, whole number. So let's just use number there, right? The next one is we want to let the doctor know if they're checked in. So why don't we create another column there called checked in. Checked in. And then this one would be a Boolean, or in Dataverse for Teams, it's called a yes, no. And we will make sure the default value is no and hit the done. So I think that's good enough for our schema in our Dataverse for Teams. So now we have our patient, and we can see here the view of all of our columns that we've created, all of our custom columns. But if you wanted to see all the stuff that Microsoft is giving you behind the scenes, there's a lot more columns that they give you, which you could take advantage of in your app. But the ones we're most interested for this app are here. And then if you go to the relationships, you can actually see the relationships between the doctor here and the patient. So now we got our data source set up. The last thing we want to do is go back to our patients and perhaps add some data. Again, I like putting some data in, because when I'm building my apps, it actually refreshes right on the fly, and I'm working with real data. So perhaps we'll add a patient. Let's do Jean-Luc Picard. I got some nice pictures there. Let's put an age of. He's a little bit older, I don't remember, but let's put that and choose him as Dr. Feelgood Doctor and give him a phone number. That's not a good one. Let's do here. Let's do Spock. Choose him, another doctor, and then give him a phone number. And then lastly, just one more piece of data we want, and let's do Captain Kirk. Okay. So let's use Dr. Zeus for him. Okay, so now we got some test data there that we're working with. I'm not going to populate the picture now. We'll populate that within our app, but we'll hit the close button, and now we have data within our doctors and our patients. So now that we have our data source set up, let's go back to our app and start building this thing out. How are we doing on time? Half an hour left, so I'm going to go fast. So here's our apps, and we're going to go and edit the app that we created and saved already. And the first thing we're going to do is make sure our app is referencing those data sources when it loads up. We'll give it a second. Okay, so it has this default screen, but if we go to our data source, notice that it's only referencing on the patients by default. We want to add a reference to our doctors table as well, right? So now we got a reference to the doctors table. And notice that it automatically started filling some information here with this app here. So I can actually click on Spock and see the details here. It doesn't show all the columns, but you could use this screen if you want. But in this demo, what I'm going to do is create my own screen. So what I'm going to do is go to the tree view here and create a new screen. And we're going to create a scrollable screen first called patient. Actually, you know what? We'll call it list one that shows all the patients, just to show you how to build out these screens from scratch. And then we'll call this one called, this is going to be all of our patients. So let's call this one all patients. Okay. And then the next one, we're going to create another screen. We will make it a scrollable list, right? And then this one we will call, let's call it the patient intake form. Okay, so we've got our patient intake and our all patients view. Now that we have this, let's actually delete this other screen. And the first screen that's shown here is your cover screen. So that's where the app navigates to. So we want it to come to this view. So that's really, you could bump this up as you want, move up and move down. But now what we're going to do is start building out the patient intake form. So this patient intake form, what it has a canvas, which is this right here, and it has a data card. Within this data card, we want to add a form. And we're just going to go to the plus button for the components, and we are going to find an edit form. So we'll click on the edit form, it adds it here, and let's drag it here to make it look nice. And go. We'll extend it. And right from here, what we're going to do is connect that edit form to the data source. And that data source we're going to be clicking, that we're going to be doing is we go to this drop down here on the right hand side, is the patient's data source. So now it's only showing one record here, so it should pull up all the columns we're interested in. So it does some columns by default, but we probably want to edit the form so that it has the information we're interested in. So again, we'll select the data source. We'll click on the edit fields. You know, there's this thing called picture ID. Perhaps we're not really interested in this one. We want to see the doctor, obviously. So let's go and add a field called doctor, right? So drag this one. Perhaps this is fairly important at the top. We can drag picture at the bottom. And then it doesn't look very nice. So what I'm going to do is change it from a 3-column view to a 1-column view. Okay, so now we got a form where they can fill out the name, doctor, phone, checked in, whether they're checked in or not, their age, and the picture. I think that's good enough for now from a form perspective. And then you see here this title. We probably want to do something like show the name of the team we're in and the patient name here. We could do that a little bit later, but here, the thing that we're on the text right here of that title. One of the things you get here that I wanted to point out is this team's context. And with this team's context, you have reference to the team you're working with. So that's why I just want to quickly show that. So by going to that team's context, I type in teams, and I'm able to get stuff like, you know, the team that I'm in. So this team as an example. And as an example, you know, what's the display name of that team, right? So perhaps we want to show that team that we're in. And we want to show perhaps patient name. Let's just leave that like that for now, and then we'll get to that later, just so we see something. Okay, so that's a really cool concept you guys will work with as you guys get more advanced into Teams, Dataverse for Teams apps. So the next thing I want to do is perhaps I want to add a back button to get to the other screen. So what I'm going to do is go to my plus here, and I'm going to go to my buttons here, and then let's find a shape that looks like a back arrow. So let's add that one here, a back button here. Obviously, it's not showing up because it has the same color. So let's go fool around with the colors to see if we can get it looking nice. So there we go. So there we got our back button. Now, when they select it, we want it to go back to the cover, which is the first form, right? So what we're going to do is type in the word back on select. We're going to go screen transition.cover. So that's going to take us back to the previous screen. The next thing we want to do is from here, the receptionist, we're only going to want to check in that person. So although they can click on the drop down here to check them in, let's have a little fun with this. So what we're going to do is add another button here on this form, and then we'll call it the check-in button. So we'll add a button here. Obviously, let's change the colors a bit. And then the background white. And then, we could do things like change the font size to 25, make it bold to make it look nice. And obviously it still says button there, so we're going to change the name of the button. You could do it from the properties pane, but you can also do it from here under the text drop-down item. So we will say check in. Okay, so now we got a check-in button to invoke the flow to let the doctor know that they're there. Okay, we're not doing anything there. At a later point, we'll hook up the flow. We'll show you that in a few minutes. But we also need another button to submit this form. So let's actually create another button here on this form, and then we'll just drag another button in. Here's a button. So we will drag it right here, and let's make this a nice big button. And this button will be the submit button. Again, let's maybe change the background to green to make it stand out, and we will, make it 35 in terms of the font, make it bold, and then we will change the text of that button to be submit. Plain old submit. You can't lose that one. So, okay, so now that's going to be our submit button. When they submit the form, when they hit the submit button, so on select of that, we want to be able to submit the form. So what we're going to do is type in the word submit form on select. So the form is form 1. And then we're going to navigate to that patients view, the all patients view. So there is all patients right there. Okay, we also want to give some notifications that when somebody saved it, it was successful and such. So why don't we, I've got that in my clipboard. I'm just going to copy and paste some of the text we can do when you click on the form itself at the bottom here, and then you go to, there should be an on success here. Then we could paste that in like a piece of text. So all we're doing is notifying, it's a nice green view that says the patient has successfully been edited with a notification type of success, and then we're going to navigate back to the all patients view from that perspective. Now you could also do the same thing for on failure, but I'm going to skip that one for now. But in the meantime, let's save it because we don't want anything to be lost. Okay, so now we've pretty much built our form, our patient intake form of editing and such. Now we want to go back to our all patients form. So here we want to change the title as an example to all patients. And you notice it has a nice view of all the patients here, but it's not connected to any data source. Remember how it looks right now, but if we click on right here, and what we're going to be doing here is changing the data source to all the patients. So the data source here on the right-hand side is all the patients. So here we go. So now it's listing Jean-Luc, Captain Spock, and Kirk, right? So in that view automatically for us. Now all we got to do is start mucking around it with it to show all the rest of the stuff. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to, maybe drag these up a bit. And you notice when I'm editing the top row, everything else changes. Decrease it. We'll put some other information, like perhaps we'll copy and paste that one. Maybe some other information that's important is age. So we'll actually just change this to age. We probably want to put some descriptor information here as well. So for this one, maybe it's something like, patient name. Ampersand, here we do phone. And then here we'll do age. Okay, so now the other thing that's important for people to see is the the doctor, who the doctor is. So what we'll do is we'll just put the doctor here to the right here, maybe drag this over a bit, just to start making it look nice. You know, we could even change the colors and such. You know, let's make the full color green, right? So that they know where to click. So here's, right now it's age, but we know that this is the record that it's pointing to right now, that this item. So what we'll do is change this to the doctor. But now we're pointing to the doctor, the table itself, because it's a relationship. So when they click on that, it gives us an arrow. But to get the name of the doctor, you just press the dot and we can get to the name of the doctor. So, and it says, and then we could just put the word doctor here. And we will bold it. Scroll down here, maybe the background, we make it, again, a nice color here. And then we'll make it darker. Then we'll make the font white. And we also want to know if they've checked in, right? So we'll just quickly make that bold, because that's important for the receptionist to know. I'll skip them, making it bold. Okay, so we also want to know if they've checked in. So I'm going to copy the age here and paste that right here, and we will change this to checked in, the question mark, and then we will say this item dot checked in, because that's one of the fields we did, right? So it tells us if that person's checked in or not. Okay, good. So I think we have this screen pretty much done. The only thing we need to do is, you know, show the images and stuff, which are already connected. We probably want to make this look a little bit nicer. We'll make it fill. Right now, we don't have any images for the users yet. So that's why you're not seeing anything there, because we got to upload these images. And then the last thing we need to do is this button here, kind of hook it up, right? So when they click on this button, we want it to do something like, on select, we probably want to select the parent and then reset the form. We're going back to the previous screen, so we want to reset it. And then we want to navigate to the patient intake form. Okay, so now we've hooked this up. Let's save this guy and actually make sure the forms are correct on the left-hand side, and we'll move it up here. So here's our forms. We've got the all patients first. We've deleted that other one. And why don't we just preview it right now just to see how it looks, everything. We'll click on the preview button. And right from here, we should be able to get to the form. And right now, it's not showing that patient. So we did forget one thing. So in order to show the patient, we actually have to set that form as the one that's selected here. So when we go to this card, we need to go to the item. And this one is the one that was selected, template gallery 1 dot selected. So now it's showing the person that was selected. So let's go and save that and preview that one more time. We'll hit the preview button and then we'll go back. This is not hooked up. I got to go to the other one first, the main form. So let's preview from this one. And then let's see if it populates Jean-Luc. Okay, it does. So you know what? So while we're here, let's populate some pictures. I got some nice pictures here. So we got Jean-Luc. Submit that so that we can see if the other form looks nice. And we'll do Captain Spock. I got a nice picture of Captain, the younger version. But, oh no, that's the wrong one. But let me go fix that because that bothers me. There's Spock right here. Submit this guy. And then let's do Captain Kirk. We can't forget Captain Kirk, of course. Here we go, the younger version of Captain Kirk. Save this. So now we see that our app is working right within Teams. Let's go a little bit further now. I've got 15 more minutes and I'm going to try to get as much as we can here now. So the next step is we want to create a flow for the check-in button. Okay. So for this one, what we're going to do is go to that form where we created that check-in. Right here is the there's actually, we got to fix that. We'll do that later because we want to show the patient name. But I really want to get this check-in button hooked up. So what we're going to do here is to get that, we're going to create a flow. And to create a flow from here, the easiest way that I like doing it is you can actually, there's a little Power Automate button there. But the way I like doing it is by going to my team, this view here. And if I go to my team in this tree view here, I'm able to see all my cloud flows here. And what I'm going to do is create a cloud flow here. And I'll click on the new button and I'll click on the cloud and we'll say instant because they're clicking a button. We're going to create this one. We'll give it a name of patient, let's say, patient intake Power App check-in button flow. Right? We can call it whatever we want, and it's going to be triggered from Power Apps. We'll click on the create button. And then here is our trigger already set up. The next thing we're going to do is when they hit the check-in button, we want this piece of code to actually update the Dataverse database that was creating for us. So what we're going to do is find the common data service, which is going to be renamed to Dataverse soon. And then we're going to find one called update a row. So there should be an update a row item here. There we go. So update a row. Now, what row are we updating? We have to ask that in Power Apps to get that information from that. So we're going to click on the ask in Power App for the item ID. But first, we got to select the patient table here. Here's our patient table, and this one we're going to ask in Power Apps because we don't know the item we're updating. But we do know that we do want to update the check-in field here. So we'll say yes to checked in. Okay, so that's done. It's probably as a best practice, you know, you should rename it to just say update patient check-in because you're probably going to be referring to this in other steps. The next thing we want to do is to we want to get the doctor. Okay, we also want to get the doctor because we want to notify them. So what we're going to do is click on the common Dataverse here, and we're going to get a row this time. And then we're going to change this to the doctors. Because again, remember the purpose of this flow is to check them in and update the Dataverse database with that field from no to yes, and also to notify the doctor. So we're going to get the doctor, and how do we get the doctor? We go to the update patient check-in, and there should be a doctor associated with that. And we just point that doctor to the value here from there. Okay. The next thing we want to do is we want to add a new step here to just notify the doctor, right? So we'll do a filter on Teams. We'll filter on Teams, and then we'll notify the doctor that it's been checked in. So we'll go find the trigger here, post a message as a Flowbot to a channel. That's a nice one. It connects to the Teams automatically because you're already logged in. Okay, we'll select the team ID. The team ID is this one that we just created. What's the channel? We'll just use the general channel because we only have one there. What's the subject? You know, patient checked in, and then a piece of text there. So as an example, you know, hey doc, patient, and then we'll put the name of the patient, and where we get that patient is from the update patient record. Down here, the name, patient has checked in. But then we also want to notify them, right? So we could use the @ symbol and get their email. That's the reason I put their email address. So from when we got the doctor, we can get their email address because we got that doctor right here. And this @ symbol should have a notification so they actually know something's happened. So we'll hit the save button. And now we've created our flow. So we'll wait till this for this to save. So now that it's saved, we need to hook that up to our Power App. So let's go to our apps and this Power App here. We'll click on the edit button. Okay, and give it a few seconds to load. Promise it'll come. There's our app. We'll go to the patient intake form and we'll click on the check-in button. And remember where I showed you the Power Automate was from up here? We'll click on the Power Automate button, and there should be a flow that shows up here. Now, before we do that, we want to select the on select because that's where we're doing it. I've seen some issues if you don't select that on select and you get in some sort of endless loop. There's some kinks that they're still working on, but if we click on this ... we go to Power Automate and then we'll select the flow that we just created. Okay, now it's going to be prompting us for some information because it needs to know the item we're updating. So it asked us right here. So we notice that it's give us the item we're updating. And how we get the item we're updating is by referencing the template gallery list dot selected dot patient. Let me just verify that that's the right one. Yep, that's selected. And then we want to jump back to, let's go to the back to the cover page. Okay, that seems right. No errors. So now there should be a flow that's hooked up to it. So I think the app is almost ready to go. So what we're going to do is publish this app to Teams. So we'll click on the publish button. We'll hit the next button. And we will select the channel we want it on. So we just press the plus button. We hit the save and close button. So now we've built our Power App with the flow behind the scenes that checks in and notifies the doctor. So what we're going to do is now go to the team. We'll see the team we created, and I'm a stickler for images, so let me just put a nice team picture here. Upload of picture, and there we go. So now we've got our patient intake with a nice picture with it, and if we go to the general channel, we'll notice that there's a new tab here that showed up. It's our patient intake tab. And now within this tab, it's going to ask us for the connections. And theoretically, it's going to show us all the patients that we added with them, right within Teams. Right from here, we can actually go and, right now they're not checked in. The receptionist can go in, make any changes they want. If the age was wrong, 74, they can hit the submit button. That'll save it, right? And we see that information there. And we can also hit the check-in button here. So this is the kind of success message that I was talking about earlier to give a nice notification to the user. And it keeps on showing up. So I'll hit the check-in button. Now that theoretically has invoked the flow. So if I do a refresh on this app, if the flow worked correctly, then we should see a pop-up message notifying the person, the doctor, that something's happened. Now it takes a few seconds for that to go. Now we're almost at time, so I'm actually going to jump to, we'll give that a few seconds. You'll see a pop-up show up in a second. But you notice they've now been checked in, right? And if the flow got in, and if we go to the posts, they've been notified right here. And they got notified themselves that something happened. So the flow did work correctly. So now we've only got a few minutes left in the session. So what I'm going to jump to is Power Virtual Agents. So with that same app that we had under Power Apps, we're able to get to the Power Apps, to the Power Virtual Agents. So what I'm going to go to one is that I've already created because we're running out of time now. So let's go to Power Apps. The concept here is that the doctor wants to kind of pull a bot to know where, who the next patient is, right? So I'm just going to refresh this guy. That's a little bug that shows up there. Sometimes you just got to refresh that on the browser view. But the concept here is that we want to pull a virtual agent to know who's the next patient. So here we'll go to this build, and we will go to the this one that I've already created, just to show you out of expediency and time. Okay, and it's not able to show. Let me just refresh this guy again one more time. So see more. Okay, so here is the virtual agent or chatbot that I've created for this one. So if I click on this chatbot here, what I'm doing is, this is in essence, it's like a little Power Automate flow, but it is a bot. So it's going to query that Dataverse database that I've done to be able to have a chat and say, who's my next patient? So I'm going to go to the topics here. And here's my topics for my virtual agent. And I've created a new topic called next patient. And that next patient is basically it's called next patient, and there's a trigger phase. So the doctor is going to say, who is my next patient? Who's next? What's my next patient? They could add anything we want here, right? Who's next, right? So we can do that ourselves, right? Because we know what the doctor is going to say here. And from here, we're going to go to the authoring canvas. We're going to we could save the topic, and then we can go to our authoring canvas. And that authoring canvas is where we're going to hook it up to that Dataverse database. So here is the trigger phase for that. Here is the flow that goes to the Dataverse database and gets that information. So if I look at this flow, what it's doing is querying the Dataverse database to get all the patients, the first one that's coming, and returning it back to the virtual agent. So now if I go back here, the trigger phase is this, the action is this to get me the next patient, and I'm giving a response of, hey doc, the next patient is this. So here, if I were to test it here, who is my next patient? With whatever text that I want. And the cool thing here is, just like Power Automate flows, where you see the success. And right here it says, hey doc, the next patient is Jean-Luc Picard. And then I have that bot. And all that capability right now, it's surfaced up on the left-hand nav, left-hand bar. You just got to add that Power Virtual Agent app, but soon that's going to be all surfaced up within our team. So that kind of brings us to the end of the demo, and we are right on time, because what we've shown you today is a combination of all these different services in the Power Platform and Microsoft 365. Teams for the hub for where everything happened. We showed you how we're using Dataverse for Teams as a data source to create our tables. We showed you the Power Virtual Agents, how a doctor can say next patient. We showed you how we can create 2 screens in our Power App really easily to show a gallery view of all the patients and to edit the patient and hook it up to the doctors. We showed you flows to check in, right? So really cool capabilities we showed you there. So I know we're almost at time. We got about 1 more minute, and I don't want to jump into the next presenter session, but what I will do is stay back, and if you have any questions, put it in the chat, and I can pass it off to the next presenter now. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that session, and I'll stay around to help with any questions.
Thanks, Noorez, for the